The gospel reading for today is from Luke 11, 1 through 13, which is on page 72 in the New Testament section of the Pew Bible there. He was praying in a certain place, and after he had finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples." He said to them, "When you pray, say, 'Father, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come. Give us each day our daily bread. And forgive us our sins, for we ourselves forgive everyone indebted to us. And do not bring to us the time of trial.'" And he said to them, "Suppose one of you has a friend, and you go to him at midnight and say to him, 'Friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived, and I have nothing to set before him.' And he answers from within, 'Do not bother me, the door has already been locked, and my children are with me in bed. I cannot get up and give you anything.' I tell you, even though he will not get up and give him anything because he is his friend, at least because of his persistence, he will get up and give him whatever he needs. So I say to you, ask and it will be given you, seek, search, and you will find, knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for a fish, will give a snake instead of a fish? Or if the child asks for an egg, will give a scorpion? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will the Heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to those who ask?" May the Lord bless this reading of the gospel. There are a lot of interesting parts to that passage, and I'm not going to unpack them very much today because I want to do something different. Over the years, I had the privilege of meeting a number of people that I consider to be sort of heroes of mine, heroes in the faith. None of them would be people that you recognize because they were not celebrities. They might have been very articulate, courageous speakers. They may have been people who helped to shape the dialogue in that world that I lived down in the Deep South. There were people who spoke out about race and about war and other issues. And whenever I was around them, because I admired them so much, I wanted to really know them. I wanted to know what they were like. And I wanted to know how it could be that they could be so different from most of the people that I saw around. You may have that, there are people like that in your life. People that are sort of heroes and you want to know them, and you want to know what makes the difference. And a lot of times now when I'm meeting somebody, particularly if it's somebody that I see swimming against the culture, I want to know, one of the questions I'll ask them is, where do you get the strength for that? Why is it that you're different from the other people around you? Why is that? And I'm wondering, where does that strength come from? And usually I'm asking something about their spirituality. Jesus' disciples had been with him for probably different ones for different amount of time. And they had seen some wonderful things. They had seen Jesus do miracles. They had heard him speak articulately about the issues of his day. They've seen him stand courageously against the political and religious leaders of his day. And they wanted to know how it is that you are seen to be so attuned to God. And so they asked him, teach us to pray. And so Jesus in his answer to them, according to Luke, was that he gave them what we normally call a portion of the Lord's Prayer. He said, this is the way you pray. Now, I've heard a lot of different things said about the Lord's Prayer. One of the things that's one of the most unifying things we do. Today, when we read the Lord's Prayer, I was very much aware that people all over the world today or yesterday, depending on where that time zone is, I always get that confused, or tomorrow, whenever it is, whenever it's Sunday, in some places. All over the world, people have been reading, are reading or quoting that prayer in some form. Now, and there are portions of it that we say differently, particularly the part about forgiveness. Some of us, like we, and I really notice this among American Baptists, we say debts. Do you find yourself stumbling over that word? We get that part where it's forgive us our, and we say, so some people say debts, some people say sins, some people say trespasses, don't they? And so, but I have found that among American Baptists, it seems that debts is the common word there. But for the most part, the words are the same. It's a unifying factor. I've also found that when I want to go outside Baptist circles and I want to do a little research, I just turn to Helen and talk to her. And so I was wondering what role that the Lord's Prayer, which is also called by many Catholics as what? The Our Father. The Our Father. What role does that play in the life of Catholics? And so, and we Baptists who don't understand, who have not, are Protestants who, many of us do not have much of an understanding of the confession process, And so sometimes when people have, when we think of a Catholic coming to a priest and asking for, and confessing, and the priest offering absolution, we've seen these little parodies where the priest might say, we'll go and say 3 Hail Marys and Our Father, So I was asking Helen, I said, okay, have you ever had that experience? Have you ever gone to a priest and he's told you that? Is that something real? She said, oh, yeah, sure. And she said, and she said that, I said, well, was that punishment? That you had to say it out loud? And she said, no, it's not punishment. It's in tuning. It's bringing your life in tune with God. That's what it is. So when you think about that, if you are Catholic, you still go to confession. But if your Catholic friends go to confession and you hear that they have been assigned to do an Our Father or 3 Hail Marys, it's not a punishment. It's an attunement, a way of attuning life. And the Lord's Prayer is that for most Catholics. It represents much more than just those words. It represents, it's sort of a bringing the situation under the guidance and governance of God. And that's a role that it plays. And I think that is also a role that it plays for us too. Now, so as I thought about the sermon and as I thought about the passage, I decided to do something just a little bit different this week. So in my mind, I went around the room. As I could remember it. And to the extent that I actually had email addresses and could find them, I sent email addresses out to people and said, what does the Lord's Supper, the Lord's Prayer mean to you? And why? Which part of it speaks to you the most? And some of you replied. A lot of you, replied. Sadly, a lot of people who replied said, I won't be there Sunday, but this is what I think. Okay? So if I missed you, if I didn't send you an email, then I apologize, because I realized that when I came in today, I could have sent one to this person or that person. So I decided today that I would let you provide the meat of the sermon. Because, see, I think that the real sermons of life roll out of the community. They roll out of the relationships. And so I'm going to quote some people. And I can't remember if I went back and asked everybody permission to quote them or to paraphrase them. So, I did. You rather me not? You rather me not? Okay. Not to put you on the spot right here. Okay. All right, people sort of broke it down into like 4 different groups. There were one group was the group that sort of the Our Father, and when I asked Helen, I started with Helen. I asked her, I said, which part speaks to you the most? And she says, it's all pretty good. And several of you, I mean, who are you to tell Jesus that his prayer wasn't very but she said the fact that it's our Father, the plural, God is the parent of us all. God cares and loves us all. And this was similar to what Carrie Cheeseman wrote me. He said, as to the Lord's Prayer, while it is all important, everybody's a little bit afraid, I think the first 2 words, Our Father, are extremely important as they set the stage. The idea that we are all part of God's family, that God chose us instead of the other way around, that God's arms are big enough to encircle all who are willing to come to Him. That is a message that we often lose in our us versus them. Our Father, all of us, all of the humanity, all who have ever been born. And Matt wrote, my favorite part is that it's written in the plural. Our Father, give us our daily bread. Our us, lead us, etc. This tells me that the Christian life, or at very least prayer, is meant to be a communal experience. As we believe in a triune God who is a community unto themselves, we believe humanity is made in the image of God. It is in community as Christians we can see the image of God in our lives. Thank you all for sharing that. Then some people said, my favorite part, and the part that speaks to me, is give us this day our daily bread. Oliva wrote, give us this day our daily bread. I like this because it reminds me that God gives us all we need. Bread can be nourishment, but it also can remind us that God is always with us. And Joe Jackson wrote, as Joe would, very concise, give us today our daily bread, give us today what we need to live. And Drew wrote, my favorite part of the Lord's Prayer has always been, give us this day our daily bread, which means a couple of things to me. The words serve as a reminder to focus on the present and ask God that just our most basic needs be met. Not just our own needs, but all of our needs, the need for all of us. Additionally, it reminds us that we constantly need God in our lives. I always enjoy hearing an emphasis on this day, this day. The third group was deliver us from evil. And Rennie wrote, in this line, I'm reminded that we have God on our side, and we can move to help, and He can move to help us out if we face and engage with any type of evil in our life. God is still in the deliverance business, and He will help out anyone who will pray and cry out to Him. Carrie Taylor, office manager, wrote, I would say, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In the Catholic Church, during the baptismal rite, you were asked to reject the glamour of evil. That always fascinated me. I got to thinking about evil. It doesn't come to us in a big, scary, as big and scary. It's subtle and alluring. The devil is one of God's most beautiful angels. Evil is something we are attracted to, like gossip, or envy, or getting into the blame war on the internet. I appreciate in the Lord's Prayer that we acknowledge that temptation and evil are always there, and we need both God to help us and our ability to recognize the glamour of it all. And Molly said that and Molly put her finger on what the point that is often the weakness of every theology. Is that right? Yeah. It's what's with evil. Evil is sort of hard to fit into almost every theological system. And Molly went on to say, deliver us from evil. What good is a higher being if He can't deliver us from the monsters of the world? That's the question. That's the theological question that most theology sort of stumble around. It seems sometimes He does choose to deliver us, and sometimes He doesn't. What makes Him choose either way? I've heard it said that God created the world and everything, He also created evil. Because He did give us the choice to choose either. And if both didn't exist, then where did it come from? But we all beg God to deliver us. I feel I get more help when I ask for angels to help me than God. And I think that there are many that their image of God is connected with authorities in their world, in their lives, and so sometimes it's very difficult to picture God as being this loving, caring, loving parent. And so I think that's one of the reasons that in not only that's one of the reasons that not only do some of us sort of look to the angels around us, but also to other traditions look to saints. I can't quite bring myself to go to this God who is called Father, but Mother Mary does seem to have my pulse and understands. That wasn't too bad, was it? Okay. The fourth breakdown came from Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I learned something interesting about that particular passage, and we don't have time to unpack it very much today, but it's not in the Bible anymore. Did you know that? That most modern translations do not actually have Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done on earth as a part of that. And the reason is that it was not in the oldest manuscripts for Matthew. But the church, for almost 2,000 years, has embraced that as part of the Lord's Prayer. So the tradition is very strong, and the way that it speaks to us, it touches our hearts in ways that, and is a part of who we believe and how we believe. I really believe in didactic criticism, where what we really believe is come tumbling out of the experience of the community of God's people and this is one of those things. Bobby Borstick said, my favorite part of the prayer is thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I'm not sure if I interpret this correctly, but I feel that it is a promise from God that if we pray and walk closely with him, that someday his kingdom will come to overrule the corrupt here on earth, and his will shall be carried out in spite of those who work against him here. Joseph, who's not here today, he said, I would say that kingdom come, that thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, my favorite portion. The reason why is because I feel it really reflects the end game of God's saga, where his kingdom will finally be established in its entirety, and God will reign on earth in the same way he does in heaven. I also feel it exhorts us here in the interim to seek justice and to live out God's will in the world. And Julia said, I like the kingdom to come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It guides us in how to think and act in ways aligned with how the Creator wants us to engage with the world. It also reminds us that there is a beautiful place where true peace and justice is possible for all. And Allison added something similar. I like it because it speaks to the radical inbreaking of God's kingdom on earth, where there will be justice, mercy, and peace, God's shalom. And Isaac wrote, he broke it down, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. He says in the first part, for me, I'm asking for God's kingdom, the kingdom of love, to grow and flourish on earth right now, not just in eternity after Jesus returns. And the second part, very important to me, because it is saying to me that God and God's love will ultimately be victorious, and all of creation will someday live in the glory of God and in God's love. And then he goes on to say that he sees glimpses. If I'm telling us he sees glimpses of how this is coming about already. Now sometimes I watch the news and I come away feeling like, okay, we're a long way from the kingdom of God on earth. You feel that way sometimes, And so it was encouraging to me, Isaac, to read what you wrote. He said, God and God's love, ultimate victory is very important to me because I grew up as a black kid in southern West Virginia. And although the racial issues and prejudice was not nearly as strong as it was in the Deep South, it was still a significant part of my life. I was taught that life is not fair, and actually not fair for anyone. I had to learn to live with prejudice around me, and yet not become prejudiced or angry myself. Understanding that I could not change the entire culture. So for me, I was also praying for the day, most likely well after my earthly life had ended, when there was no racial, religious, etc. prejudice. Because of the time, it was hard for me to conceive of living in a world with it. By the way, just as an aside, as I visit Bluefield, West Virginia now, I see positive changes regarding race that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. I know many current Christians do not necessarily believe in miracles, but for me, this has been a miracle of the unbelievable power of God's love, and it makes me so happy to see it every time I go back to Bluefield. Thank you for sharing that. And it's encouraging. Okay, so what do you think was the largest group what portion of the Lord's Prayer was chosen by the biggest group, biggest group? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. The part about forgiveness. Beth wrote, taken as a whole, it's a pretty good prayer. They did a nice job with it. And while I find comfort in the whole thing, I think my favorite part is forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. It's a call to action, reminding me of the importance of returning love to others. God's love and forgiveness for each of us is unconditional. The Lord's Prayer asks us to pass on that love to others without judgment or reservation, just as God does for us. That phrase reminds us of God's love for all creation and the part we can play in multiplying it. I'm aware of other interpretations of this line that refer to monetary debt. There's also the translation issue of debts or trespasses. Better theologians than I can argue the finer points. I look at it all as a general reference to the love of generosity and grace God willingly showers upon us. This great power expresses respect and worship for God, references the gifts of provision and comfort for me, but becomes more complete through the simple action I can take in the reference to others, to others to further God's love within my own life and those of others. Frank Van Lijn wrote, in this sentence, the gospel is contained in a few words. Treat others as we want to be treated. Do we want an open relationship with God? We need to be open with our neighbor. And I laugh because he told this little story, a gift story. He says, my favorite is, lead us not into temptation. Lead us not into temptation. As a kid, I could never understand why, if we want to forgive others, would God tell us to pray that God leads a snot into temptation? Leads a snot into temptation. That was how Frank was hearing the story. Oh well. He said even if a person is a regular snot, shouldn't we forgive him or not, him or her? Bob Horstig said, he wrote, forgive us our debts. It seems to me that it reflects the fact that we all carry debts in our lives because we are flawed, and before we receive forgiveness, we must forgive others. David said, I think it would have to be for me to forgive us our debts, but like we talked about privately, I like using sins instead. It's also arguably the most interesting line, since you can look at different versions across the different churches and traditions, and compare and interpret the different implications of the meaning. Helen Spengler said, forgive us our debts. It reminds me to be as gentle to others as I'd like them to be to me. Oren said, it reminds me that I always stand before God as a broken and yet sinful human being in constant need of God's mercy and forgiveness. It also reminds me to extend the same mercy and forgiveness to my fellow humans, not out of my great strength and holiness, but as a fellow struggler. And Leslie said this was her favorite because it reminds her that it is easier said than done, and I need continual reminders to keep doing it as I often fall short. I also get something a little different out of it when we use the alternative words. She was suggesting that maybe we use the alternative words sometime. Ari said, my favorite part is Just, Father, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. I often need a reminder that there is room for mercy as well as room to be more merciful. Jasmine wrote a prayer. I probably share the opinion of a lot of people. Favorite part, forgive us our debts. Least favorite part, as we forgive our debtors. I think it's ironically cool how you can't have one without the other. Like you can't ask for forgiveness without being willing to forgive. And Walter wrote, great. Thanks for asking something to fun think about. I've really come to appreciate the line, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. When I was young, I used to interpret the as here as instructed, as indicating the kind of action we wanted from God. For example, we might want God to forgive us the way that we would forgive a debtor, by wiping our slate clean. And I do think that it's still something important to appreciate about the line, that God is the kind of merciful God who wipes the slate clean. But as the context of Matthew illustrates, something more difficult is being self-imposed by the speaker of the prayer. The speaker is asking God to forgive her insofar as she finds it in her heart to forgive others. The speaker is asking God, the God who gives the day really a setting, a place to live, and bread, food, resources, the chance to flourish, to weave her very existence into the existence of others, so that her own welfare is partly constituted by the welfare of others. That's why forgiveness can only happen when we forgive others. Our slate cannot be wiped clean with a grudge in our heart. Only love, because this is our truest existence. This is something I learned to appreciate with time, and something I still find particularly marvelous about the prayer. Well, those were the responses. I hope you've heard the sermon that each of you preached to each other. I got a new book. It actually came from our friend Colby. Sent Helen and I a gift. And it's 8 Habits of Love by Ed Bacon. Ed Bacon is an Episcopal priest in California. And he has these 8 habits of love. And one of them is generosity, but things he says about generosity could also be said about forgiveness. I'm going to just talk a little bit about forgiveness, since that's where we sort of landed there. The part of the prayer that caught more people as we throughout the net. Bacon said, "The mighty Jordan River meanders along the eastern border of Israel and Palestine, giving life to 2 bodies of water, the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. The Sea of Galilee teems with life. Everywhere you look, there's vitality. On the water, people are fishing, boating, and water skiing. On the banks, people are relaxing, eating, and drinking. Everyone is enjoying themselves. 60 miles to the south lies the Dead Sea. It is just that, dead. The reason for this stark contrast is simple. The Jordan River flows both into and out of the beautiful and vibrant Sea of Galilee. Inflow and outflow, inhale and exhale, receiving and giving, like our relationship with the Beloved. From the southern banks of the Sea of Galilee, the river makes its way into the Dead Sea, but there the river stops. There is no outflow from the Dead Sea. The human spirit, just like the seas, need both inflow and outflow in order to foster life and create energy. When love flows out from within us, more flows in. When we open our hearts to love, we not only spread that love to others, but also open our hearts to love. We not open ourselves to others, to others, to ourselves. Let me see if I can read this. But also open our hearts to love. We not only spread that love to others, but also to receiving love from others. Our outflow determines our inflow. The more we give, the more vital our lives, the bigger our spirits, and deeper our living. When people are on the receiving end of generosity, and I would say on the receiving end of forgiveness, it opens their hearts in a way that is deeply transformative and sends ripples of love outward into the universe. I was thinking about that analogy that you have this lake, the Sea of Galilee, and there's a stream that flows through it. And that same stream flows all the way down to the Dead Sea, and there's no outlet. So all the minerals and debris it comes into the Dead Sea, and it just sits there. But the sea that is open to receive and to send out is vibrant with life. I think it's especially true for forgiveness, don't you? That's the way it is. In my own life, when I have failed to forgive and refused to forgive, my life becomes stagnant and deadly. Deadly for me and deadly for others around me. But if there's this receiving of forgiveness from God and this giving of forgiveness, then the sea that is my life is vibrant and full of life. I think that's what Jesus is getting at when in this dynamic relationship that he describes in this prayer. And how do we do that? It's sort of hard. If you're like me, there are times, I'll pray for forgiveness. I'll seek forgiveness in my problem, something in my own life, and it just seems like it just keeps coming up again and again and again. And sometimes, there'll be something that someone has done to me, but I keep remembering, after I've already forgiven, it keeps coming up again and again and again. How do you exercise this flow of forgiveness in your life? One of the things that Ed Bacon says in the chapter on forgiveness is that the forgiveness is that God responds to the desire to forgive. Sometimes the best we've got is not the ability to forgive, but the desire to forgive. And if we desire to forgive, then God respects that and responds to it. This is the beginning place for us. We could do lots of sermons on a lot of these, but I appreciate you hearing each other, hearing the people around you on this, on this subject. It was gratifying to me because sometimes when we do things that are ritualistic, we do it every week. I wonder, but why do we do this? And now I know. Now I know that that it speaks to you and it speaks to me.